Hi, I'm Ollie. Welcome to Possibility Space. Today, I'm going to read you Complicit in a Genocide, How Do Labour MPs Sleep at Night? It's an article I wrote about how Labour MPs justify their pro-Israel policies to themselves. As I'm recording this, however, Israel has just broken the ceasefire that it agreed to by killing about 400 people in one day. My article, written before that happened, doesn't even try to grapple with the enormity of that crime or with the horrors that will surely come next. With that in mind, before I read you the piece, we're going to hear from Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, who is on the ground in Gaza.
We've worked throughout the entire night. We haven't stopped. Bombing has been non-stop. We've run out of ketamine, we've run out of propofol, we've run out of all painkillers. We can't sedate anyone, we can't give them any analgesia. When we intubate people, they wake up and they're choking because we have no sedation. There are 7 girls getting their legs amputated, no anesthesia. The bombing is still going on, the room is still shaking. I haven't slept. We went to bed at about 1 o'clock and at 1:30 the bombing started. It's about 10 a.m. now. I've just gone back to my room. I'm lightheaded, I'm dizzy. I mean, it was just mostly women and children, burnt head to toe, limbs missing, heads missing. You know, there's a video I put up on my story of me doing a chest drain. The gentleman that did the chest drain and he died on the way to the CT scan. There's another video of 3 girls laying on a bed. That's his 3 girls who are now orphaned. Their mother didn't even make it into the hospital. She was killed along with their other sister. I don't know what to tell you. I was here in June. Nothing to this intensity. This is unbelievable. And the bombing is still going on. The rooms are still shaking. The screams are everywhere. It's insane. I need to just take 15 minutes, or even an hour, just to rest, to go back in there and go back down again. I feel awful to leave, but I've been there all night and I haven't stopped, and my legs are shaking and I feel dizzy and lightheaded. The smell of burnt flesh is still in my nose.
Okay, with the heaviness of this topic now established, let's read the piece. Britain is a direct participant in Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza. We lead on intelligence and logistics, and we provide them diplomatic cover. In this context, I often wonder how British MPs sleep at night. Not the Conservatives. Their defend the West worldview and proud history of Islamophobia predisposes them to pile up brown bodies. But the Labour MPs, who see themselves as genuine defenders of liberalism, multiculturalism and peace. I've corresponded with my MP, Chris Curtis, on this topic. His answer seems to be that he manages to sleep at night by lying to himself all day. These MPs are not fanatics or sociopaths. They're regular people who use cliched excuses instead of thinking for themselves. Here are the lies that I've seen Labour MPs tell themselves to justify backing an ongoing genocide. When viewed together, they are, I think, a useful illustration of the banality of evil. The first lie is that Palestinians must die so that Ukrainians may live. Britain sends weapons and military gear to Israel. Israel used them to commit war crimes in Palestine. The British government recently had to admit this in court after failing to cover it up. Labour MPs justify this by claiming that cutting off Israel would, quote, have the potential to disrupt the international supply chain and weaken the ability of other nations we provide exports to, such as Ukraine, to defend themselves. Palestinians must die so that Ukrainians may live. It is a grim calculus that would lead any half-decent MP to ask questions like, can we support Ukraine's defense without supplying Israel's genocide? We know our exports are being used for war crimes. Shouldn't we exclude the state led by a fugitive war criminal from this supply chain? Shouldn't we follow the UK's legal rules? Arms sales must end if there's a clear risk that weapons could be used to violate international law. Labour MPs are simply not asking these questions. Another lie that Labour MPs are telling themselves is that arms exports are an unalloyed good. They're campaigning to classify arms companies as a social good under environmental, social and governance, that's ESG, investment rules. The implications of this proposed rule change are macabre. Let's say you choose to invest your pension in a fund that's labelled good for society. This proposal would mean you'd end up owning a stake in an arms manufacturer. The third lie that Labour MPs are telling themselves is that knowledge is dangerous. Specifically, that anybody even knowing about Britain's role in Israel's ongoing genocide threatens our security. I've previously reported that the government are asking the press not to discuss British military support for Israel. It's also censoring requests for information from MPs and Lords on the issue. A new development, however, is that Labour MPs are now censoring themselves. They claim that even asking these questions could threaten our security. Here's a first-hand example. Mark Smith worked as a policy advisor at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, that's the FCDO. He recently resigned, alleging that ministers pressured FCDO staff to skew assessments of whether arms sales were legal. Quote, "My time at the FCDO exposed how ministers can manipulate frameworks to shield, quote, friendly nations from accountability. They stall, distort, and obscure official processes to create a facade of legitimacy while allowing the most egregious crimes against humanity to take place." Smith was not the first FCDO official to make such accusations, so I asked my MP, quote, "What is the government's response to these allegations? Will there be an investigation?" He replied that, quote, "I'm not going to pretend to have the answers to all of your questions, and I also try to speak for myself and my own knowledge on foreign policy rather than strictly on behalf of the government, and of course, it would not be right for the government to share every detail of security or intelligence briefings." MPs actually have a job description. It says that they should, quote, "raise issues that matter to their constituents," and that, quote, "this includes asking government ministers questions." My MP is refusing to do his job, arguing that simply asking questions poses a security risk. He refuses to speak on behalf of the government, which is fair enough, but by presupposing that the government won't give him an answer without actually asking them, he ends up doing just that. I've reached out to my MP to clarify his position further. Usually a prompt interlocutor, he has stopped responding to my emails. The last lie that Labour MPs tell themselves is that they support a two-state solution. Labour MPs take their lines from the party's leadership, so they always phrase this in exactly the same way. Quote, "We need a two-state solution with a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable and sovereign Palestinian state." Attentive possibility space listeners will notice the double standard. Israel is named and promised safety. An unnamed Palestinian state is only promised viability. They talk about Palestinians like unborn fetuses. Today they're viable. Perhaps one day soon they'll count as real human beings. Labour don't even mean any of this, of course. They insist that they want to recognise a Palestinian state, but they also insist that the time is not right. Opposition MPs introduced the Palestinian Statehood Recognition Bill to push this issue. Labour MPs revealed their true colours by opposing it. I cannot speak to the intentions of these MPs, but the material impact of their policies is to delay long overdue support for Palestinians in their most acute hour of need. Conclusion. I didn't write this article to attack Labour MPs, but to try to understand them. I'm sincerely interested in what motivates mundane people to support grotesque policies, and in how they self-justify. Here's what I think is going on. First of all, there are the true believers. Luke Akehurst is a Labour MP. Before this, he was a pro-Israel lobbyist. He also lobbied for arms firms. He's not a mystery. His politics are right there in his resume. Labour is not just the party of Luke Akehurst, though. It's also the party of Melanie Ward. Ward stepped down as CEO of the aid charity Medical Aid for Palestinians to become a Labour MP. She has done much more than most for the Palestinian cause. So what's she doing in this Labour Party? That's a much more interesting question than why is Luke Akehurst behaving like a demon again? I suspect she thinks she can do more good inside of government than outside of it. Given mounting reports that Labour MPs are aghast at what they're being asked to defend, I don't think she'll feel this way for that much longer. Certainly there's also a degree of cynicism involved here. I doubt my MP is dodging basic questions about misconduct at the FCDO out of real concern for national security. The simplest explanation is that he doesn't want to make trouble for his government. This level of cynicism isn't normal. It's beaten into our elected representatives by the whipping system. Another factor is that many MPs are simply ignorant about this topic. This is not an accident. MPs are more likely to take an all-expenses-paid propaganda trip to Israel than to study its violent history. I believe my MP when he professes his inexperience, quote, "If I'm being honest, I'm not an expert in these foreign affairs." I have some sympathy here. My MP cares about domestic politics. It's not his fault that he knows little about a war that began before he was born. He only becomes complicit a little more each day if he chooses to remain ignorant while holding power. I also think there's an element of self-deception and performativity at work here. To paraphrase Judith Butler, these MPs act and walk and speak and talk in ways that consolidate an impression of them being decent people. There's a self-deluding power to reiterating that you support a two-state solution while you arm one state that's flattening the other. The potency of this delusion grows when all of your friends and colleagues are chanting the same mantra. Sometimes the delusion overpowers the performer, and the performance briefly becomes real. These expressions of humanity are inconvenient for the government, so they are quickly stamped out. David Lammy, clearly uncomfortable with being the face of British support for genocide, this week finally described Israel's illegal blockade of Gaza as a breach of international law. This admission is unacceptable to the government because it exposes them to criminal liability. The Prime Minister's official spokesperson rode back Lammy's remarks. Spokespeople are granted relative anonymity by the British press. It's fitting that Labour chose an anonymous individual to call out a named person for acting like a human being for a change. For the sake of their mental health and their electability, Labour MPs must be allowed to perform humanity. However, this veneer of compassion must not be allowed to alter policy. It must always be an act. There are many issues here. Our expectations of our MPs, how easily swayed they are by lobbyists, and how badly bullied they are by their own parties. I think the least we can do, as their constituents, is to tell them the truth when they lie to themselves. Thank you for listening. I hope you found that interesting. Possibility Space is a reader and listener supported publication. If you're interested in supporting us, you can become a paid subscriber on Substack, or you can subscribe for free on Substack or on your podcast app. And 5-star ratings never go amiss. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.